afternoon, Dr. Lorian.
I'm not a doctor, but good afternoon.
Good afternoon, Mr. Lorian.
He gave you a compliment.
Now, Mr. Lorian, you were hired by defense counsel, correct?
I was.
You were hired to provide your opinion on the practices of Officer Keenan.
Yes.
Now, to provide your opinion, you analyzed information.
Or the lack of information, yes.
Well, that information that you did find came from 3 sources, correct?
Yes.
One of those sources was information from defense counsel.
Yes.
The other source was your 2014 audit of the Midland State Police Department.
Yes.
And the other source was from public request records.
That's true.
Now, have you ever seen Officer Keenan before today's case?
No, I have not.
Exactly. Officer Keenan was the main focus of your investigation, correct?
He was?
And you didn't interview Officer Keenan.
No, I felt as though I had the necessary information to come to a conclusion without talking to him.
Well, that's only your opinion, correct?
Yes, and that's what I'm here to give.
Now, you also didn't interview his informant, Corey Hyde.
Yeah, I did not. Again, I felt it wasn't necessary.
Now, you gave your opinion on the undercover investigation of Avery Bancroft,
Yes.
but you didn't interview Avery Bancroft either.
Again, I felt it was unnecessary. I had the necessary information to come to a conclusion.
Dr. Lorian, to be clear for the members of the jury, you haven't spoken to a single witness relevant to today's trial, have you?
That is true.
Now, I'd like to move on to some of the undercover guidelines that you spoke of on direct. Now, on direct, you mentioned that you couldn't find any undercover training of Officer Keenan, correct?
That is true.
You also didn't find any of his academy training either, correct?
That's true.
Now, you presume that he went to the police academy, correct?
I do.
But you never actually had that documentation in your hands.
No, and again, this is an issue.
As an expert in your field, you are aware that certain information regarding undercover officers can be classified, correct?
Yes, however, the Midland State Police Department was cooperative.
No, the Midland State Police Department only gave you information on public records requests.
Yes, and the investigation had come to a conclusion.
Classified information cannot be obtained through a public records request.
Is that a statement or a question?
Dr. Lorian, can classified information be obtained through a public records request?
I do not believe so.
So since you said that information regarding under-officer training can be classified, it is possible that information regarding Officer Keenan's undercover training is classified, correct?
It's possible, however, unlikely.
So since it is possible, you cannot tell us with certainty that Officer Keenan did not receive that training, can you?
I cannot tell with certainty, however, standard practice for many law enforcement agencies is to document it, and it is peculiar that the Midland State Police Department does not have that documentation.
But just to be clear for the members of the jury, you cannot tell us with certainty that Officer Keenan did not receive undercover training.
That's true.
Now, I'd like to talk about how you mentioned Officer Keenan didn't document certain character traits of Avery Bancroft. Now, you are familiar with Officer Keenan's affidavit, correct?
I'm sorry, could you repeat that?
You are familiar with Officer Keenan's affidavit,
Yes,
correct?
I am.
Now, you are aware that Officer Keenan began investigating Avery Bancroft after he heard a phone call from Avery Bancroft.
Yes,
He actually only met Avery Bancroft on March 31st, correct?
that's true.
And the arrest came on April the 19th.
Yes,
So there was only 2 weeks Officer Keenan actually knew who Avery Bancroft was personally.
yes, personally.
To be clear, the first time Officer Keenan met Avery Bancroft, he had his informant wear a wire, correct?
Yes, he did.
There is a transcript of that meeting.
There is, and I reviewed it in my investigation.
So to be clear, that meeting is documented.
It is?
Now, the second time Officer Keenan met with Avery Bancroft was on April the 13th, correct?
Yes,
And before Officer Keenan entered that meeting, he was searched, correct?
that is true.
In fact, everyone who entered that meeting was searched.
Come to think of it, I mean, I wasn't there. I'm not sure of the
Well, you are
security
familiar with
protocol.
Officer Keenan's affidavit, correct?
Oh, yes, yeah.
And in Officer Keenan's affidavit, it states that everyone that entered that meeting was searched.
Yes, they were, and their cell phones were confiscated.
So there was no way to record that meeting.
That's true.
Now, what Officer Keenan did do is he did call room service to that meeting.
Yes,
He actually identified everyone that was in the room to that bellhop that entered that room.
He had the bellhop identify them, yes.
Now, Officer Keenan identified everyone in the room to a third party, correct?
Meaning that he had the bellhop identify them for him?
He told the bellhop the names of everyone present in the meeting.
No, he had the bellhop identify the people in the meeting so that Officer Keenan would have verification. of
All right,
who
let's
they were.
move on, Dr. Lorian. Now, Officer Keenan obtained a warrant to have a wiretap of Avery Bancroft's phone, correct?
Yes,
And he did execute that warrant, correct?
he did.
He obtained a wiretap of a phone call from Avery Bancroft to Chase Covington.
Yes, it was on April 15th, I believe.
Yes, Mr. Lorian, and there is documented evidence of that wiretap.
There is. I reviewed the transcript.
So there is documented evidence of character traits from Avery Bancroft.
There is a transcript of the conversation that occurred.
Now, you are aware that when Officer Keenan began his investigation, he was only investigating the Midlands Gambling Commission itself.
Yes, he was looking for corruption.
It was only after he heard a phone call from Avery Bancroft to Chase Covington that he began investigating Avery Bancroft.
That's true, as I've stated before.
It was after he heard this phone call that he became suspicious that a possible bribe could be taking place.
I can't really delve into his mindset, but that was when he started investigating him.
Well, Mr. Lorian, you did review his affidavit, correct?
Yes,
And in his affidavit, it does state that after he heard that phone call, he became suspicious that a possible bribe could be taking place, correct?
that is true.
So after he heard that phone call, he became suspicious that a possible bribe could be taking place.
Yes,
To be clear for the members of the jury, Avery Bancroft did bribe Chase Covington.
he admitted to it, yes.
So Officer Keenan's suspicions were correct.
Yes, however, the case is about entrapment here today.
Thank you, Dr. Lorian. I have no further questions for this witness.
Thank you, Mr. Grant.